and he shows in the vehicles, including.
My name is Richard Gray, and I'm so grateful to all of you for coming to support 350 Bay Area and to chat with Bill McKibben. Jan is a medical doctor, also trained in public health, who leads our Speakers Bureau, also a member of our advisory board, and a generous donor to the 350 Bay Area. Jan.
Hello, greetings. Thank you to our hosts, and I have a confession to make. I feel like an AA meeting here in a way, but and I haven't had anything to drink yet. But I have actually been stalking literarily Bill McKibben since 1989. Not literally stalking, literally. Since the publication of that great first book, The End of Nature. For me, The End of Nature was the beginning of hope. For years, having been concerned about climate change, I definitely was glad to see that now it could get into common parlance. To me, that's the beginning. As a physician, I look upon making a diagnosis, upon them discussing it as the first step toward healing. And so I'm very grateful. I'm glad I have you as a captive audience to thank you. Everybody knows probably everything I'm about to tell you, but so I can thank him personally, I'm going to say it again, that we're thanking a fine author who has written 12 books, countless essays and articles, mostly touching on climate change, but also on the many aspects of what it means to be human and our relationship with nature, each other, and ourselves. We all know, The End of Nature has been published in 24 languages. I want to thank the activists. So 350.org, the international organization, has apparently used our name. But other than that, they've been a fine organization. In the last several years, 20,000 rallies around the world, in every country but North Korea. Okay, well, we'll wait. Eventually. There have been rallies that have been at least inspired, if not organized, by 350.org. When I think about, and there are too many things to count, the divestment campaigns that I want to thank him for, and us for, and because we were so inspired by that. The fact that, in particular, the campaign for against the XL pipeline, it was a victory. We know there need to be many more, but it was a very particular and interesting kind of victory, because for 30 years, that kind of mass civil disobedience was not really seen in this country. I know that about 30 years ago, more than 30 years, about 30 years ago, Abby Hoffman said, our campuses have become hotbeds of student rest. And he was right. So we had people getting mass arrests, and my understanding about Bill is that he's not the kind of guy who says, hey, you, 20-year-old, let him put the cuffs on. Apparently he gets into the mix a little. I hear that happened, I know that happened with the pipeline. I know that he stood up against fracking, and I think he's even stood up to ExxonMobil. So this is a person who has also been the guest of some of our nation's correctional facilities, and we thank him for that, and we thank him for not being in the slammer tonight. So for all of those things, I could go on, but I'd rather have him talk. I do, but I want to thank you especially for being here today and for being free on your own recognizance, and just thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you for that introduction, some of which was true, although I very much doubt the part about you being old enough to have read The End of Nature. This is actually, I'm very glad that I came here tonight. I'm worn out. I've been on the road the last few weeks, mostly in Ohio and Pennsylvania, trying to register young voters and so on and so forth. And very homesick because this is the nicest week of the year in Vermont, and you know, I sort of wish that. But this of all the things I've gotten to do these last few weeks is the most moving, because you know, when we started 350.org, we had no idea what would happen. I mean, it was 8 years ago, I guess now, and it was me and 7 college students, and we had no anything, you know, money or lists or whatever. We just sort of set out, but our hope and the thing we sort of trusted in was that there were people all over the world who cared about this, and given some kind of organizing principle, would come together. And at first those organizing principles were very simple. We just would say, here's a day when we need everybody to show up and make a little noise about climate change. And really the reason we did those sort of global days of action early on was just to convince ourselves and everybody else that there was enough of a movement out there to be a plausible force. The problem with climate change is it seems so big, and each of us seems so small by comparison, that it's easy to decide that it's impossible to do anything and sort of check it off and go on to some other problem where you might be able to. We thought maybe if we could just get people to see other people doing the same thing. Also, you know, the first thing we did was organize this day of action all around the globe, and it had 5,200 demonstrations in the same weekend in 181 countries, and that amazed and surprised us. But what's amazed and surprised us even more is people's relentlessness and stick-to-itiveness, you know, because we're not an organization like, you know, like wonderful but big and professional organizations like the Sierra Club. I mean, there are, I think at the moment, about 100 actual staff at 350.org scattered all over the world. So roughly now 7 or 9 or 10 or 11 or something per continent, which is better than when we started when we had 1 per continent, but still not very many. It sobers me always to know that that makes us the largest group in the world whose only mandate is dealing with the climate crisis. Just like you guys should be extraordinarily proud of and somewhat daunted by the fact that you're the largest organization in California that's dealing with this. Think about that. You all are having to take really the 8th largest country in the world in economic terms and make it move 6th largest. No, excuse me. You're doing well. That's an enormous responsibility. The thing that we've discovered, and I think you guys are discovering, is it's actually possible to do it. And one of the reasons is, and this is a strange thing to say, but apathy cuts both ways. That is to say, there's the fossil fuel industry on the other side, but there's nothing else. There's not, thousands of people out in the streets demanding that we heat up the planet some more. You know? and if we're able to muster people, then we can do things. When we started the fight against the Keystone Pipeline, no one thought that there was any chance that the National Journal, which is the kind of insider trade paper in Washington, polled its energy experts that summer of 2011, and 93% of the people that the Hill staff and stuff that they polled said that TransCanada would have its permit by the end of 2011. But then more people went to jail than anything in a very long time, and then more letters got written to the Senate in a single day than on any other issue, and on and on. And eventually it just overwhelmed even the amount of money that they could throw at it. And the good news is not that we blocked the Keystone Pipeline. That's important. The much more important news is that everybody else saw that you actually could beat big oil, and now absolutely everything gets bought. I mean, everything. There's not a pipeline or a frac well or anything in the world that some people aren't, and people are winning an increasing percentage of these battles. I mean, they were going to build 6 big coal ports along the west coast to send coal to Asia. We've beaten 5 of them, and the 6th is going to go down later this year. You saw what happened just in Benicia just a couple of weeks ago with the fight over this oil train terminal, which was huge, you know, on and on and on, and the same in many, many other parts of the world. We don't obviously win all the time, or even most of the time, but it's increasing. The head of the American Petroleum Institute gave a talk at an industry conference 6 months ago or so, and he said to his peers, other sort of fossil fuel honchos, said, somehow we have to stop the Keystoneization of all our projects. Which I'm a bad human being, so I thought that was a nice... Right now, of course, the most beautiful example of that, and one that we're going to need everybody's help on, is this fight on the high plains of the Dakotas, where indigenous, 200 and some now indigenous nations come together to really put up the first concerted show of force in Indian country in a long time. And it's terrible what's happened to them. To watch pictures from 2016 of people being attacked by police dogs is a grim sight, but they've been valiant through it all. And this demonstrates something, I don't know what I'm going to say. You've got all these fights going on, and they're all local, which is mostly as it should be. You guys know how to work Sacramento, you know, and getting better at it all the time. I was so glad that people are working the legislature and working like the PUCs and the Public Utility Commissions and things, because that's where so many of these decisions get made, and there's usually nobody there standing up for people. So even a fairly small presence suddenly makes a huge difference, you know. We're all out fighting this vast fossil fuel resistance spread out around the world, and then we're networked enough, just enough, that when big moments arise, we can come together and put on. We're going to need, I think, shortly after the election, everybody's help on this Dakota stuff. I mean, I've been off, as I say, registering voters to get them to go vote for Hillary and beat Donald Trump and so on. But it's craven that she hasn't said a word about the Dakota stuff. And we're, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the honeymoon is going to last for half an hour, you know, before we're back pushing hard. Because in the end, that's how it works. Everything comes down, I mean, the reason that I spend my time now doing this, for which I'm not really fit, you know, I'm a writer by nature. Which means, if you haven't figured out already, that I'm not like a great orator, or I'm an introvert, you know. That's what writers are, and so it's taken, you know, it's nice to be here, but I'd rather be home in my room typing. You know? I've had to go figure out how to go way outside sort of my comfort zone and figure out how, because that's what it takes. We need all the arguments and all the research and all the data. That's sort of the entry to the game, but the thing that allows you to win the game is then for every legislature and public utility commission and everybody else to know that behind you there are 100 or 500 or 1,000 people who will turn out and march and rally and cause them trouble. That's part of how our political process works, and whether or not it's the best way it should work. I mean, you know, it kills me when I watch, like, you know, I don't mind particularly going to jail. It's not my favorite thing, but I don't, you know. But it kills me to watch, like, Jim Hansen get put in the paddy wagon and that's like, you know, these are the greatest scientists in the world. They should be at work at their lab doing the science that we desperately need, not being hauled off to jail, but that's what, at least for the moment, it sometimes takes. So I just want to say, I'm so glad you had this evening, if for no other reason than just to cheer me up, and just know that the work you're doing here has echoes all over the world, okay? I mean, all over California, where you've met people from 350 Los Angeles and 350 San Diego and, whatever. They're doing great work. All over the world, too. And in many places, of course, not as sophisticated or with the same access to resources or whatever, but people with just as much drive and heart and fire. And of course, many of them operating in places that didn't cause the problem. I was thinking about this the other day when this horrible hurricane blew through Haiti. We think at least 1,000 people died, but there's hundreds of thousands of homes and things destroyed. The city that got hit the hardest was a city called Red Cay on the southwest peninsula there. And it struck a bell in my mind, so I went and looked through some of those pictures of those, 20,000 demonstrations that you're talking about. And I was right, there was one from this town in Haiti, and it was young people, as is often the case. We did this thing a few years ago called Connect the Dots, where people all over the world who already were kind of feeling the sting of climate change. Well, they made a banner. It was sort of hand-drawn, and it said on it, "Your actions affect me." That was the message they wanted to send out to the rest of the world, which is true. I mean, 1,000 people died there immediately from Hurricane Matthew, and now there's a horrible cholera outbreak underway. And they lost 90% of the crops that were in the field, which is what people were going to eat. So it's your actions affect me, but not vice versa. There's really nothing that you can do in Haiti except appeal to the conscience of the rest of the world. They can't burn less fossil fuel. They're not burning any now. They don't have access to power. They're the 6th smallest economy in the world, probably. That's our particular privilege and burden, in a sense, is that we actually are in places where we have enormous power to make change. And think how much change you've been able to make as a volunteer outfit in California with 1,000 people at your back, no staff, That's amazing. And it's a sign of just even with small amounts of resources, how much more it is possible to do. Because we're in a race, that's the thing. We either solve this soon or we don't solve it. This is the warmest year we've ever had, breaking last year's record, which broke the year before's record. We're losing the race right now, but we know what we need to do, and if we can just push it along. I'm tired, so I'm rambling. But I just want to say to you, in a sense, thank you, and know that you have brothers and sisters all over the world who are extremely grateful for the work you're doing, just as you're grateful for the work that they're doing. And it should be fun and an honor for you all to be part of all of that. Thank you all.